Good evening and welcome to the August 5th, 2021 meeting of the Ad Hoc Property Committee. I'm Supervisor James McCartney, and with us tonight we have Fred Childs, Beth Sovine, Dennis Stedman. Sarah, you don't have your last name up, so I'll just say Sarah. Supervisor Weiss, Township Engineer Jim Majewski, and Township Manager Kurt Ferguson. As of right now, we still don't have a chairperson for this committee. So as part of the process for the agenda, I'll go through the different agenda items until you guys get into a position where you want to elect somebody as chair and vice chair. So agenda item number 2 is the approval of the July 13th, 2021 minutes. So if anybody wants to make a motion.
I move that they are approved as presented.
Second.
The motion made by Dennis Stedman, second by Fred Childs. Any discussion? Okay, I'll entertain a vote then.
All in favor?
To approve the minutes, all in favor, say aye.
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 Hey, James,
Yes, Kurt.
just so everyone's aware, for the committee here and probably the thousands of people watching this meeting, that Mr. Majewski and I will work after this meeting to start to have on our website this committee's activities, the materials you're reviewing, and the minutes as we go for a record. As we know, as an ad hoc committee, there's a specific assignment. I think it's important that anybody could look back at decisions and discussions that you have through the course of this committee. So tomorrow or maybe by Monday, you'll start to see all that stuff and all those links on our website as well.
All right, thank you, Kurt. And hey, James, nice to see you.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Agenda item number 3 is a zoning overview. Jim, if you want to chime in on this.
Sure. I prepared a little presentation on this for everyone's benefit. And I'll go through briefly the history of the farm, where we are, and what some of the zoning implications are for the property. And we'll just take me a minute. Is anything up on the screen?
It is black.
Okay, let me try that again.
Yep, now we can see it.
Well, we'll see the paint on the left side, even though it's shouldn't be there. So here's just an overall aerial view of the Patterson Farm. I-95 is on the left side of the screen. Mirror Lake Road is where the mouse is running right now. Yardley Langhorne Road comes on through. There's the greenhouse that was built in the back of the farm, a pond, detention basin, the Patterson Farmstead, and the Satterthwaite Farmstead. The Patterson Farm was required in 1998 by the township, and it's located in the R1 residential low density zoning district. There's 2 farmsteads on the property, as I pointed out, the Patterson Farm that has the Janny Brown house, and also the Satterthwaite Farmstead, which was purchased, I believe, by the Pattersons back in 1955. And approximately 170 acres of the land is leased as farmland. The Patterson Farmstead has the Artist of Yardley house, or the Jenny Brown house. That's leased by the Artist of Yardley. There are a number of outbuildings, a large barn, pack house, corn crib, a hay loft, a couple of garages, and tucked back in the trees there is also a cottage that's very old. The Satterthwaite part of the property is located closer to Mirror Lake Road, has the Satterthwaite house, the big white one. There's a smaller building, like a sort of like a garage, a small barn or tractor shed, a corn crib, The barn that was rehabbed back in 2008 or 2009 by the township, and then a small garage that's a newer one that was built back in, I believe, in the 40s. And then here's where our leaf mulch processing area is on the farm off the driveway coming in off of Mirror Lake Road. Another property that the committee was tasked with looking at was the Slack House at the Makefield Highlands Golf Club. The township purchased that property back in 1996 and then opened up the course, I believe, in 2004. That's also located in the R1 residential low density zoning district and has the golf course along with the Dalgowitz or Slack House, as it's called, that currently is unused. And here on the graph, you can see where the Stone Manor House is on the property. The driveway leading in off of Woodside Road, it's off to the right-hand side. The clubhouse, as you can see, is further up ahead on the property. The overall size of the Patterson and Southgate property, or the whole Patterson Farm, is 221 acres. And 183 acres of that is located within an existing agricultural conservation easement. Originally, 71 acres was preserved, and the remaining acreage of the 183 was preserved in 2017. The farmland is managed in accordance with the conservation plan that was developed by the Bucks County Conservation District. That sort of outlines the proper agricultural practices that are used by the farmer to make sure that the soil doesn't erode and that we maintain the farmability of the farmland. There's 38 acres of the property that contain the houses and buildings that are free and clear of any easement restrictions. And this graphic kind of shows the area here that is not shaded in is the area that is not part of the easement. I believe Dennis had a question.
Yeah, I was going to ask for just the kind of map you turned to, so thank you. What's the orientation of this map? Is Mirror Lake down along the bottom?
Mirror
Here,
Lake's,
sure,
Mirror
that's
Lake's
Mirror
on-
Lake.
Mirror
Okay.
Lake's on the bottom. Route 332 is on.
Okay.
the right
Okay.
side.
Thank you.
95's on the left. I had to change some of the orientations of north to make it fit nice.
No, that's fine. And all of the shaded area is agricultural conservation land.
Correct.
So that is it. What are the constraints on that? Is that deed restricted that it can only be in agriculture? Can it be? Can it have any other uses? What?
Well, I knew you'd ask that question. So I listed the uses that are permitted within the agricultural easement. And it's primarily for the production of crops, equine, livestock, and livestock products, and also natural conservation type activities such as bird watching, nature study, educational activities associated with agriculture. And the construction of buildings and structures is limited to those things that are kind of accessory to a farm, like fences. It has in the agreement replacement of residential structure. However, there are no residential structures within the easement, but that was in the deed restriction. So I just showed that for that purposes. Greenhouses are permitted along with structures associated with energy production, specifically for the farm. If they wanted to put up solar or wind power to help their farming activities, that is a permitted use. And then structures associated with irrigation, farm pound and pondment, activities that are typically associated with farming. As far as the zoning of the overall property, the property is zoned R1, which is residential low density housing or residential low density. And the uses permitted are agriculture, which is primarily the current use, single family detached dwellings, which is also a use on both properties, both the Patterson Farm and Makefield Highlands Golf Course. Nursery, horticulture, greenhouse, we have that use on the Patterson Farm. A public recreational facility, that's what the use is, or one of the uses of the Makefield Highlands Golf Course. Those are the only 4 activities that are permitted by right as a principal use. They do have a number of uses and structures accessory to the permitted uses, such as auctions, garage sales, a home occupation. Livestock obviously is permitted in agriculture, but pools, residential accessory buildings such as sheds and like forestry timber harvesting, which would need to be in accordance with a forestry management plan, and an open space cluster development if that was ever developed into homes. And that, of course, is only for the part of the property that does not have an easement. And of course, that's not part of the plan for the township. There we go. Now, there are a number of uses that are also permitted by special exception. A special exception is a use that is permitted subject to certain criteria that need to be met in order to do that. And any approval of a special exception would need to be heard and approved by the zoning hearing board. And it would also have an advisory opinion from our planning commission on the suitability of any such use on a property. Those uses are outlined on the slide as a cemetery, a golf course, a library and museum, nursing home, place of worship, public or private school, utility. A conditional use is a use that is the same thing. It's a use that's permitted subject to certain conditions being met. That use would be permitted by the Board of Supervisors. So the Board of Supervisors would hear any application for that. And those uses are accessory farm business. An example of that would be Shady Brook Farm, where they have sort of their accessory farm stuff, activities, hay rides, pumpkin picking, all that stuff, sort of thing. Emergency services as a use permitted by conditional use, as well as a farmland preservation development, which obviously wouldn't apply here because we've already preserved most of the farm. Just to go through a couple of the uses that are either permitted by right, by special exception, or conditional use, that would be possible on this property: a nursery, horticultural, or greenhouse use. Basically the growing of trees, shrubs, plants, with or without retail sales, and greenhouses. And the size limitation on that is the minimum lot area is 5 acres. And the minimum setbacks from all lot lines are 100 feet. There are limitations on the amount of impervious surface. And there are a few other limitations that are shown here. It does not include a retail garden center, where it's primarily for selling plants, primarily for growing, and then the sales would have to be complementary or accessory to the actual use of growing crops. A public recreational facility is basically allowed subject to just the following restrictions: a front yard setback of 50 feet, side yard of 25 feet, rear yard of 75 feet, and an impervious surface of 17%. The other use outlined is a library and museum that would be open to the public or connected with a permitted educational use, not operated as a private gainful business. That requires a minimum lot area of 2 acres, and the other items shown below, including a buffer that would be required when the use is located in a residential district, as this property is. Actually, both properties are either the Makefield Highlands Golf Course or the Patterson Farm. Places of worship are allowed with a minimum of lot area of 5 acres, a lot width of 300 feet, and the setbacks would need to be 100 feet for the front, 50 for the side, 100 for the rear. A public or private school would also be permitted, not including a trade or commercial school. And that would have a minimum net lot area of 5 acres, a lot width of 300 feet, and an impervious surface of 17 or 18%, depending on how big your lot is, and a minimum yard area of either 100 feet for the front, 50 for the side, 100 for the rear. Another use that is allowed as an accessory use in many zoning districts, although I don't recall if it's allowed here. I don't think I saw that on the list. But a bed and breakfast is something that may want to be considered for this property. And that's using an existing dwelling to accommodate transient guests for rent, but it's subject to a number of conditions. One is that the property is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Currently, none of the buildings that are at either location are on the National Register. The Janney Brown House is eligible, and as a matter of fact, the township did start an application that was submitted for approval of that, but for some reason it never got followed through on all the way. The Satterthwaite House, I believe, is also possibly eligible for registry in the National Register of Historic Places. And the Slack House or Daglowitz House also may be eligible. That would have to be determined by a historic expert. And there are a number of limitations, such as how many people can occupy a guest room, the floor area that would be allowed. 3,500 square feet is the allowable size of a property. And I believe all three houses on the properties do comply with that. You need to have adequate bathrooms. You're not allowed to put structural additions on greater than 25% of the gross floor area. If you do that use, the owner shall be a full-time resident of the property, not someone living off-site and trying to just rent it out like an Airbnb or a hotel or motel. There are no kitchen facilities are permitted in a guest room, and the other items that you see listed on this chart. And I could share this with everyone, and also when we post it online, people can read through all of these requirements. And there's even more restrictions on it as far as parking areas being buffered, that they have adequate on-lot water and sewer so that you can serve the number of guests that are anticipated for bed and breakfast. And here's another photo of the Patterson Farm. It's made up of two pieces of property. The main property is 216.23 acres. That's the one that has the Janney Brown farmstead with the houses and barns, which are located here. The easement that we had talked about roughly runs, and I'll sort of outline it with my cursor. If my cursor showed up, okay. Runs along the driveway, comes out, goes down along sort of this hedgerow here, or a field row, then comes down out this way, and then along the edge of the 5-acre out parcel that was subdivided out of the property several years ago. That was the one that the equine hospital was proposed on, went to the zoning hearing board and was denied. And one of the reasons why, when this was subdivided out, they made it 5 acres was because a lot of uses that are allowed in our zoning ordinance for the R1 zoning district are for a 5-acre piece of property. And this narrow area along Mirror Lake Road is only 200 feet wide. And we kind of did that on purpose so that some of the uses that require a 300-foot lot width, they can only be used if they push the use back further on the property, further off the road and away from the houses on the other side of Mirror Lake Road. For those of you who went on the tour, I know we discussed a lot of the houses and toured a number of them. The names of the houses and buildings sort of vary from one report to another report. But the legend that you show here, they have the main farmhouse labeled as number 1, a well house, which is closer to Mirror Lake Road, as number 2. Number 3 is a garage. Number 4 is the equipment storage garage or hayloft. It has a bunch of different names. Number 5 is the main barn for the Patterson Farmstead. Number 6, they call in the one report the ice house. Other people call it the pack house. It's been called a garage, has a number of names. There's also a corn crib on the property, the cottage, which is number 8, and number 9 is a smaller garage that they call the tenant garage. And I'll just quickly run through the houses. House number 1 is the Jenny Brown house. It's 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, estimated to be built in 1837 and addition put on in 1920. This information was gleaned from the Bucks County Board of Assessment. So there's some variability on that. Other people have opined that this may be the wrong date, but we really don't know quite for sure. There's actually the front of the house, which is on the opposite side of the entry drive into the farm. The part that you see as you drive down the driveway is actually the back of the house. This was the original front of the house that's around back. The floor area is on the ground floor, it's 1,365 square feet. Total living area is 3,665 square feet, which would meet the requirement for a bed and breakfast if that was a use ever to be contemplated. We also have the well house that's adjacent to the farmhouse, the small garage. You can see the dates that they are estimated to be built. Here's the hay barn. You can see the doors up top where you used to load hay in up top and then store farm equipment underneath. The main barn is about 3,300 square feet. It's pretty large, built in 1840, it's estimated, with some additions put on at a later date. Then there's the ice house or pack house that has about 2,000 square feet of space. A corn crib that the town currently stores a piece of equipment in. And the tenant cottage, which the Board of Assessment estimates was built in 1840 with a small addition you see on the left side of the photo that was done maybe in 1950. It has been said that this possibly was built much earlier than the 1840 date. And then the other tenant garage, which is a small 1-bay garage with a slab. And of course, there's also the Bright Farms greenhouse. I believe that was going to be removed, hopefully in the near future. The other part of the farm is the Satterthwaite farmstead. The whole Patterson Farm used to have 2 farms on it. One farm that sort of ran parallel to Mirror Lake Road. That was up in front of where the main Patterson farmhouse is. And then the Patterson Farm, which was further in the back off of Mirror Lake Road, and actually went across where I-95 is and is part of what is now the Pricker Preserve property. That was all once part of the Patterson Farm. The Satterthwaite parcel has a number of houses. They have the main house. They have a small building or shed. And they have the front barn or wagon shed, as they call it. A back barn, a corn crib, which is on the bottom side of the driveway or the south side of the driveway. A more modern garage in the back. You can see our leaf processing facility. And the outline of that 5-acre parcel is shown here. And you can see the narrower part is about 200 feet wide and it widens out in the back. And then the house is everyone's familiar with from driving down the road. It's estimated to be built sometime maybe 1760 to 1850. There are 3 different sections to the house: the rear section, the middle section, and the larger front section. And the front section too, it looks like at one time it was 2 different buildings. One building over here and then another possible addition. It's kind of odd the way it's all laid out. And for those of you who haven't gotten the tour, when you see it, you can see how it's sort of cut up. It is a little bit unique in how it was laid out. The total living area for this building is estimated at 4,686 square feet. There's 3 stories to the building. The 3rd story is also finished, although the building is in disrepair. And here's a little sketch of the room sizes. Some of the rooms in the front of the house along Mirror Lake Road, they're like 14 or 15 feet, 14 by 15 feet roughly. So they're a decent size for some possible use. And they have smaller rooms, kitchens, in the downstairs and upstairs, not kitchens upstairs, but smaller rooms upstairs. There's also the bank barn. A bank barn basically is a barn that you could drive into the upper level on the back side of this barn, which would be around to the right side on this photo. There's just an access point to drive right up into the barn. And then the other side of the barn that you see here is sort of a lower level to the barn. This barn was built in 1900. There was another part to the barn that was a later addition built, I think they estimate in the 1930s or 40s. And that actually was in such disrepair, it had to be torn down. And the pillars you see in front along the driveway, those are the pillars of the old barn. And part of the problem with that barn is that the roof was just too flat, and the snow load and other issues with drainage basically destroyed the barn. The township did go and rehab the barn in 2008 to restore the main structural integrity of the old barn. And they, for those of you who've seen it, I think they did a really good job inside. There are some problems with the inside of the barn with animals sort of undermining the foundations. And of course, that stuff needs to be repaired in order to, really utilize this barn in the future. There's a small garage built in the 1940s out back, sort of a little bit away from everything. That's in really good condition. There's a wagon shed, as they call it, or some people call it the small barn. It's in disrepair. The wall, the concrete masonry wall, unit wall, cinder block wall is leaning a little bit. The posts are just telephone poles on top of a little concrete pillar. The roof has sags in it. The walls inside are leaning. The roof is not in good shape either. There's the smaller shed that's in between that wagon shed we just showed and the house that you see in the right part of the photo. That has 600 square feet. That building's in pretty good shape for some sort of use. It does have an unfinished floor, but it's in pretty good shape overall. And then the corn crib is on the south side of the driveway. Its foundation has been undermined a little bit. The building is leaning and is in disrepair. For the Makefield Highlands Golf Club, here's in blue the outline of the overall golf course. The house is on the driveway as you go on the way in. The overall property has 181 acres. The Dalgowitz, or slack house as they call it, is at 1418 Woodside Road. It's a 5-bedroom, 4-bath house. It was built in 1700 with an addition put on in 1935. And you see the addition in the back of the house. The ground floor is 1,750 square feet with a total living area of 4,269 square feet. I believe all 3 floor levels are finished. There's a little patio area in the back of the property. And I know I gave out everyone a whole bunch of references. The main references that I think everyone should really look at are the facilities inspection done by Remington Vernick in 2021. That did an analysis of several of the structures that weren't covered by the 2014 report by Clark, Caton, and Hintz. Also, they have a structural evaluation of the Satterthwaite House, which outlines some of the repairs that need to be done. And there were a couple of reports done by the Heritage Conservancy about 15 years ago about some management strategies and a strategic vision for the report. Neither of those were really followed through in any great detail. And that's sort of why we have the ad hoc committee now to sort of look at what can we really use these properties for and what's the best way to proceed going forward.
Hey, James.
Yes, sir.
I just want to, and I'm going to keep Jim on the line here, but just to give a little more guidance here. So Jim, and for the committee, Jim covered, right, what can be an arduous list of like what's allowed, what's not allowed. But I want to get to a different question if you could cover briefly, Jim. So while the committee looks at uses, potential uses moving forward, while the existing zoning, conditional uses, special exceptions can prove to be helpful as a guide, I want to make sure that the committee knows is as we have these discussions, it does not have to be limited to those uses. And Jim, can you just go over briefly if the committee has different ideas that don't fit into the parameters of the use? I'm thinking particularly at the Patterson Farm site, whether it be a use or a concept, whether that's a zoning change, an overlay district. Can you just talk briefly about some of these things to just help the committee know if they understand how something could be developed if it falls outside of our current zoning?
Yes, since the uses are kind of limited because the R1 is sort of designed to be residential, like basically roughly 1 acre zoning or smaller lots if clustered with open space preserved, such as the farmland preservation developments up in the north end of the township. A lot of the uses aren't quite maybe what would be best for this. One of the better examples would probably be the historical commercial district that outlines some uses, and I'll share my screen. You might not be able to read this adequately, but they have a bunch of other uses like retail uses such as craft shops, art or framing gallery, photography studio, tailor, leather workshop, iron workshop, all those things that you see listed. Hopefully you can read it. Basically sort of historic like shops, glass blowers, lace makers, furniture, refinishing. Television repair is kind of funny because that's a little bit antiquated. I don't think anyone ever repairs a television now. Office uses are also something that if you did some kind of overlay using the historical commercial zoning district or the traditional neighborhood overlay district as a guide, chiropractors, doctors, dentists, opticians, psychologists, the teaching of cooking or crafts, maybe even a restaurant. That's maybe not suitable for that area, but there's a whole bunch of uses listed for the historical commercial zoning district and also the traditional neighborhood overlay zoning district that I think might be something that can be considered.
And the reason I bring that up for the committee is again, while that sets certain parameters, I don't want the committee's thinking or for you to feel stifled like this is narrow when we have ideas or speakers or people come in that sparks an interest, that we would certainly work with Jim, and you have 2 supervisors here to get a sense of the reaction if there was some tweaking of the zoning to allow something that you think is a really useful or compatible use for those properties. So don't be limited by what Jim just presented.
Thanks, Kurt. That's a good point. Jim, thank you so much for putting that together. That was a very in detailed work of exactly what's going on down at that property, and we appreciate you. I think you're going to be able to share that with the team, that presentation.
Yes.
We'll put that up on the website as well, James.
Okay. Did anybody have any questions or feedback regarding the slides? Fred? No, Fred Childs. Go ahead. You're on mute. Fred. Are you unmuting yourself? Oh, there you go.
That was good overview, Jim. I appreciate that. At some point, can we get an understanding of what the current leases or agreements are to those groups or individuals that use the property now?
Well, I know the farmland lease, I believe, was just approved by the Board of Supervisors in May. And Kurt, if you'd like to take that one.
Yes, that lease was just approved for the farming aspect surrounding that site for 5 years. That is Charlotte Farms that has that lease that just finished their 5-year lease, which was just renewed. The other leases, though, Fred, I think that would be the only lease that we could sit there and reference in terms of the vacant structures that you were outlined, other than we have a commercial use for an art use at, what house would that be called, Jim? I apologize.
Janney House.
Janney House, yes. There's a use that we have in the Janney House. And bet I know you have a grip of these, if there's any other leases down there currently active other than those few.
I believe Colleen Atara rents the cottage as well. I don't know if she has a
Oh,
lease.
yeah, she does. I'm sorry. That was the one I was actually referencing originally, was Mrs. Mike's wife, Colleen. Yes. But we can get more details for the committee to have sort of a listing of what this, where those are in terms of obligations to the township and the tenant.
It's my understanding AOI Art Center has a 10-year lease that was signed in 2016 with a 5-year non-renewable. So that's my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So you're halfway through?
Depends how you look at it.
Halfway,
We're a third of the way through.
halfway in, not halfway
Okay, got it.
through.
We're a third of the way through.
So Dennis, I think you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, I just, first I wanted to thank Jim. I thought the presentation was very good. I particularly like the aerial shots that show the buildings and then the ground view of the buildings. And I'd propose that image that you had with the coding of 1 through 10, that this committee perhaps adopt that as its guide when we're trying to refer to these buildings, because as we look at various reports, it's, sometimes it's called one thing, sometimes it's called another, just for efficiency of communication. If the committee's interested in adopting that map as our label in our language, it might avoid some confusion.
That only covers Patterson, doesn't cover
No,
Satterthwaite.
I know, and it goes.
You want the other one for Satterthwaite as well?
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
I'll
And
number those so it makes more sense.
yeah, just common language is useful. I'd also make the observation that while that presentation is very helpful and those pictures are helpful, they don't come close to explaining the condition of those buildings. I know Fred, Bet, and I toured the most of those buildings here recently, and it's really important, I think, for this board and any decision maker to be walking through those and understand their condition. It impacted my thinking about this entire thing, having done that, and we did not get a chance to go to the house at the golf course, and I would still like to do that as well, because standing in the space, feeling the softness of the floor or the firmness of the floor, or the amount of animal droppings that are in there, it all has a big impact on what your impression of what the building might need. So I would request that we try to pull together a second tour for those committee members that didn't for whom it didn't work last time. And I'd be happy to tag along on any of those and try to catch that the house at the golf course in that process. It's worth 20 Zooms to walk through them. It really is.
It's good feedback, Dennis, and I think that we can put something together again and throw it out in an email to try to get a second round. I don't think Sarah and James had an opportunity to go through, so I think that that's important for everybody to get the same kind of feel that you have.
And there's such a wide variation in those buildings. I mean, Jim referenced the large barn at the
Satterthwaite
house. Thank you. That is in pretty good condition. The renovations that were done a decade or more ago. The second floor looks real nice. The foundation is a disaster though, so it you have a problem unless you fix the foundation, which is, and I think one of the recommendations has to be some serious woodchuck control, because most of those buildings are occupied and the foundations are being destroyed by woodchucks. You can't even walk in there without, risking breaking an ankle. It's woodlock, it's woodchuck heaven. Because they're unoccupied, and that's where they want to be. I mean, if that farm was active, you'd have an occasional problem, but it's inactive. So they're going to make hay there because it's quiet and it's safe and it's warm and out of the wind. But nothing can be done with any of these buildings unless there's a serious eradication of the woodchucks. I have never seen it that bad. So that's just an obvious first step, no matter what else is done.
And Dennis, I will tell you, believe it or not, I'm going to try to frame it this way. We have had a lot, especially over the last few years, an aggressive woodchuck capturing operation that literally goes on year round, and it seems
been there, done that. It never works. And when
no. Yeah, I mean, listen, we try to take them over to Newtown, but somehow they keep working to Lower Makefield. So,
well, when it's at this stage, a professional exterminator that eliminates the current population is just necessary, and then there have to be steps taken to prevent them from repopulating. They'll just fill it back up again.
Yeah,
and that's some combination of either burying really heavy iron fencing underneath the soil inside the building and for a couple feet outside the building so they can't burrow. And that'll last 20 years or so until it rusts out, but it'll stop them, or concrete. But as long as it's bare dirt and as long as it's vacant, we could eliminate 200 woodchucks next month, and a year from now, there'll be 200 back. And trapping them just never gets it done.
I understand, Dennis. You advised Dennis. I understand you advised my public works director the same technique that my grandparents used on their farm for woodchuck control.
And we're not going to talk about that on, right? Thank you.
All right.
I advised him and only him.
It was humane. It's humane.
Sarah, did you guys have any questions about Jim's presentation?
No, I think my only one was just, and I think you had just referenced it, scheduling a tour of Patterson, because it's a large property and there's a lot that I think that would go a long way to explaining it. And then I wasn't clear, did folks go on a tour of the golf course, or that still needs to be scheduled?
I don't think the golf course happened yet.
Okay, all right, so that one I can still hook into. And then Patterson, who didn't go to Patterson? There are a few folks, I guess.
Yeah, I believe it's James and yourself.
Okay.
I would also go.
And Sarah and James, we can get an email chain back and forth, and we can.
Okay.
Again, even if it's not during the week, if it's after hours or on a Saturday or something like that, that fits your schedule, we could try to make that.
Yeah,
work.
during the day would be tough, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I had one question too. Since I'm on the Historic Commission as well, I got the chance to talk to Dan, who's on the Board of Supervisors, and obviously, we've been talking a lot about the historic properties that the township owns and what might need to, be completely overhauled or renovated and have these big costs. But I took a look over the resolution and that created this committee, and it doesn't seem to just be limited to historic properties either. So, potential uses and reuses of township property, that's a pretty broad mandate. So I'm wondering when we can get the sense of what we need to do with township property as a whole, and not just these 12 historic buildings that have, we've done a lot of research on previously that looks into, rehabilitation or historic preservation, whatever it may be.
So specifically, James, what properties do you think that would fall under?
Well, I think that would be all township-owned properties. There, that might mean like office reorganization or different uses of other buildings, whether or not like municipal buildings need any sort of care or reorganization or honestly whatever. But you know, that was just something that I got from this, and it didn't seem like the resolution restricted it to this relatively small subset of all of the township-owned properties.
And I think, and Kurt, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the reason that we are focused on what we're focused on is because of the various stages of neglect that these properties are in versus, obviously the township building, the pool, the police, those other buildings. So I think there's a little bit of sense of urgency around these properties. I'm not quite sure if the resolution, if the idea of that resolution was to look at every single property that the township owns. It could be. Kurt, do you have feedback on it?
I don't think so. Good. To the James that asked the question, not to the James the supervisor. Good question. I think the board, what James McCartney supervisor said, I think was the thinking. The properties that we provided information on, I think was the intent of the board. To be honest, the township building was built in the 70s. And probably is its own case study for, there's a lot of townships rebuilding their buildings, over the last few years. And my guess is in the future, that would be its own committee, with site restrictions and stuff. I think the thought of the board was, as you heard from Mr. Majewski, some of these properties could be registered as historic properties. That could be a choice or a recommendation of the committee. I think the intent of the board, since I was part of those discussions, was if the recommendation was that some of these should be registered and some wouldn't necessarily rise to that level, that the committee could feel free making those recommendations one way or another. Some could, so in the end, I think the hope of the board was to look as broadly as these properties as you could, much like we talked about use, whether you think they should be registered and preserved that way, but to not feel obligated that all of them had to fit under that umbrella. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just going to double check with Dan because he definitely gave me the impression that from his point of view, that this resolution was more broad than just obviously there's an urgency when it comes to the rehabilitation of these historic buildings, but it seemed like it was much broader than just looking at these 12 or so buildings.
Well, and I think the reason you saw the reports that you have the properties in the outline was the thought of a majority of the board to focus on them. If you all believe, I think it's fair to say that there's some building that the township has that warrants its own consideration or inclusion in this, that certainly is the purview of the committee to ask those questions and make that determination. I think the board was open to that, but with the idea, much like Supervisor McCartney said, that these had sort of a different level of urgency with them.
And if I might add, in the Google Drive that I sent to everyone, there is an asset inventory report that sort of shows the properties and the buildings out there and what we have and what we own. One that we don't even own that we lease, the Warren Farringer house in front of the Giant Shopping Center. And so those buildings are there. We're still in the process of gathering some information on that, like floor plans and what do we use all these buildings for, just so we can either as part of this committee later or in the future, look at our whole overall space utilization.
James?
Sure, Fred.
Just one thought on the resolution. It clearly requires not only a initial report in September, but a more or less final report by end of first quarter, March of next year. So I think we've got enough on the plate right now. I understand the concern with there may be other buildings as well, but I think we've got enough to look at right now.
I
No,
think,
of course, and the same reason why, I just want to make sure that we're fulfilling whatever the resolution is requiring us to do. If it is same thing that it says September 1st, it doesn't necessarily specify or enumerate these buildings. And I just wanted to make sure that we were going to provide the desired product.
I just want to reinforce to the committee, because that the dates are meant to be more benchmarks than specific obligations. Obviously, if the committee is working and those dates get pushed back, first off, I wouldn't find that surprising at all if that happens. So don't feel the need to rush discussions or anything else specifically because of those dates.
Well, the board needs to make that clear in the resolution then.
yeah, there's a couple of things, Fred, obviously that we're going to need a little bit more clarity on or you guys are going to need more clarity on from the board. I'm going to go back to the chair and just make sure that, we have discussions with, myself and the other supervisors to, what those dates are. And then also to your point, James, I want to make sure that there's a consensus on what the intention of the resolution was. If it was, specific properties in the township, or it was all township assets as a whole. I don't want to, I don't want this committee to kind of splinter into different ideas of what we're supposed to be doing with this time. I think that, everybody wants to be on the same page. So I'll get clarification from the chair and a consensus from the other supervisors. And at the next meeting, I'll make sure that I have a direct point for you on that.
That would be perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions for Jim on the present? Yeah, Dennis.
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know if it's for Jim or for Kurt, but the properties that we're talking about have well water and sewer. Is it your belief it would be relatively simple to run township sewer and water to those properties? In the same way Kurt was pointing out, don't look at the zoning as fixed or locked. We may need to be, we'll be able to flex some things. Is that amongst the things that we should consider flexible? When you look at some of these uses, well and septic tank may not be ideal.
So I'll answer that question. Yes, I think you should look at that as a possibility. I mean, you look at development anywhere and you look at rural areas, and what holds back development, frankly, in rural areas is the lack of public sewage. So in the end, and so James, I don't know if you mind if I jump, because I think the questions are sort of coming back to this. And I just want to jump to number 8 because we might as well.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was looking at that as well. So I think maybe it'll help a little bit with the steering of where we're going.
So I have on the agenda, you'll talk about future discussions. I'm talking about future discussions, and I think it's relevant. I think there's a lot to look at, and I just want to make sort of 3 initial points and then one conclusion to put something in an idea in your head is, I could see us working to bring, for example, a development broker in, someone who, listen, we could have the greatest ideas in the world. And if someone who specializes in what people in the market are looking for and what's out there says it's not viable, or says, just like to your question, that's a great idea, but you're going to need public sewers for something like that, you're going to have that. But I think someone to give a sense of the market, of what's out there, what's viable, what clients are looking for is a useful discussion. I'd like to have a discussion as well that we can bring in some staff members that we have, that I'd like to, as an example, as sort of a financial presentation with all of these properties and what grant opportunities are available that could assist in those discussions. And even our engineer and Jim to talk, if there's questions, we get more into specific details of the scope of the rehabilitation. And frankly, I want to give one more thought for the committee, because I've thought a lot about this over the last couple of weeks. I've participated in these discussions on large development projects with nonprofit groups and with towns and communities. And oftentimes everyone has lots of different ideas about what they think would work. Talk to a broker that says it could work. You know, frankly, one of the recommendations, and I keep coming back to this, and I mentioned this to James and Fred, who I spoke to today, is I've seen efforts like this where committees would make recommendations to hire firms that specialize in giving report and even do some recruitment on these types of uses, and would use a committee like this as the steering committee, where you come up with the framework for the costs and the rehab and how it'll work, and you bring a firm on to assist with that, where you all would be that committee they'd report to, take direction from, to assist with that report. The hardest part of this, and I said it in the first meeting, is going to be having our hands around specifically what is the best or variety of uses that will be best. And that is going to be the hardest part. And if the committee comes back and thinks we can deliver a report, but we want to make that recommendation to the board or give those insights to the board, then the board could make a decision about budgeting for such an endeavor, keeping the committee together, and using you all as a steering committee. So I think we'll continue to plug into this information. Dennis, like your question was sewers, and I think that should all be on the table. And if we're going to talk about investing, you know, easily 7 figures into all of these properties, infrastructure and the utilities are going to be critical to make potentially to make these properties viable. And with whatever we end up concluding, you all end up concluding is a course of action. So I want to start having these speakers to start and presentations to start laying this out, and even initiating those discussions that we talked about if you all think that that is viable. That's all.
Question.
Yes, Bet.
Kurt, probably to you. When we're looking at the figures that we're looking at, like 600,000 to $1 million on the Satterthwaite house. My question when we were walking around was, if we invest that, what's the expectation? I mean, do you need to have a return on investment back to the township in some regard? Or do you say, hey, we saved it, yay, and we're okay if it's for a minimal income use?
So I'm just the manager. I'm not an elected official. Okay. So
I'll toss it to James.
But let me say this. I've done these projects before. I've done these projects with restoration buildings in distressed areas of Pittsburgh, known as the Mon Valley, where all of the steel industry closed. And the answer to that question in those examples was, it depends. Right? I mean, there are some buildings that just the restoration all by themselves and sort of a display piece is terrific. There are others that could have a marketable financial opportunity for reuse that makes sense. So there's not necessarily a specific answer to that. I think part of this process is to uncover what those opportunities may be. So I think from my perspective, doing the budget, I love the idea of a restored, historically significant house that brings back revenue to the township to offset future costs and to allow it to be maintained. But I still think if the committee decides that a study or someone to look at these things, those things can really be delved into in great detail. And you know, those grant opportunities may provide those opportunities as well to really do substantial rehab, regardless of the economic impact that comes back after they're restored.
Okay, I've got one more question here between the Janney house and the Satterthwaite house, because we haven't been to the other one yet. They are old, and maybe there's I don't know if there's historic. Maybe James Nice, you could speak to this. What's the difference between historic and old? I mean, they are not unique. There's a lot of stone farmhouses around. There's a lot of 1840 Center Hall colonials around. So what's the difference? Stop smiling, Dennis.
I'm old and Jim is historic, at least from a staff perspective.
I mean, did something, the Continental Tavern has the Underground Railroad. Did something historically significant happen on these properties, or what are we looking at?
I guess Jim or James, do you guys have insight on what the difference would be between something that's, old or something that's actually designated as historic?
So like on the National Registry of Historic Places, like I've never made one of those applications before to put a building on one of those registries. I know that there is a copy of one of the applications, I think, at least one of the applications for the properties in that Google Drive that was sent to us. So if you want to take a look at it there, it's kind of a long document, so I'm not entirely sure. But if anyone else has.
Yeah, I'm up on the Janney house and some of the unique stonework that's in there, but it's not unique. The house across from Mirror Lake from us was built by the same builder. One on Lindenhurst Road was built by the same builder. It's not unique. What makes it historic? I'm sorry, Fred, you want to chime in?
As I understand it, I was the liaison to the Historic Commission last year. For it to be historic requires the building to have some significance. One of the things the Historic Commission was talking about was the Edgewood Gardens neighborhood, which is now, or Edge Hill Gardens, is now approaching it's now 100 years old. It's the first developed neighborhood in the township, and as such would be eligible for historic status, the whole neighborhood. So, I mean, there's a flexibility in calling something historic. I understand that unless I'm mistaken, that the Satterthwaite home is the oldest wood structure in the township. Helen Heinz made a claim that the original building may date to the 1600s. So, with some research, it would be eligible for historic status. But
well, I just want to put out there that when I was working with Helen, when we first got into the Janney house, that the original portion that what we now use is called a dining room in the Janney house was 1730. So I don't know why that doesn't show up on the assessment, but it showed up in some of Helen's other research. So there's obviously gaps. There's differences in the research.
Status, it doesn't really protect the building.
Yeah.
It's more of something the community desires to do so would. That's something that the committee can make recommendations on in the future. My own opinion is that this committee has plenty to deal with, and it's not a short-term committee so that as time goes by and we tackle certain structures, once something's done, we can go to another building, and before you know it, James, everything's dealt with. But if we deal with too much too soon at one time, nothing gets done. We have to be focused. The consensus of the majority of the Board of Supervisors, and I think James Supervisor McCartney would agree with me, is that the importance is this committee gets a priority list, get the most in need to us, so give us recommendations and we can move forward. And I'm hoping that we have enough that maybe that in the next couple of months we have a preliminary report to provide to the full board.
The other quick thing about historic, the National Registry of Historic Places, is there are a couple different criteria that can get you on it. But I think it's honestly whatever the case you're able to make for a particular building, that's what makes it historic. It doesn't have to be that, one of the founding fathers touched feet on the ground at a particular building, or whatever it is, that some famous speech was built there. It could be historic because a famous or someone was a big figure in the township lived there. If someone was a representative way back in the day or something like that, or whatever it is.
And Jim Majewski, has it ever been pursued to have any of these buildings designated as historic places? And if so, what's been the outcome, or has there been too many too many gaps in the history to actually come up with something legitimate.
Lower Makefield Township actually submitted an application for the Janney House to be listed on the National Register. That application was reviewed, comments were sent back to the township, and then the trail goes cold from there. Apparently it was never followed through. And I believe I put that information, including the markup, in your packet. So it could just be as simple as getting someone to follow that through to its ultimate conclusion, if that's what the Board of Supervisors wishes to pursue. The Satterthwaite House, nothing was done on that to pursue National Registry. I believe when they did the I-95 expansion, I think they evaluated that house, and I believe they said it's possibly eligible. But then, as the other James had mentioned, there are criteria. Some of it's the age. It's was someone famous associated with the house, a famous architect, an owner. George Washington slept there. I always joke that Helen Hines always says that George Washington was all over Lower Makefield, yet we just don't have any proof of it. He was on the outskirts of it all around, but we don't have anything pinned down on that. Another thing is the integrity of the home and its setting. If you have a bunch of buildings all in close proximity, like a farmstead that's intact in the 1700s, the original farmhouse, a well house, an outbuilding, a cottage, that could lend itself to getting the necessary impetus to go forward and get that National Registry. But as James said, it's as good as the case that you can make.
Right.
Sort of
So
how-
Jim, how does that relate to zoning and potential end use? If you get it designated as on the historic registry, does that limit your abilities and how you have to rehab it and maintain it?
Yes.
It's how you rehab it, but not necessarily, and the maintenance, but not the uses, correct?
So
Oh, the use could be changed. Usually it deals with the exterior of the home. Sometimes the interior, it all depends. But, there are things you can do, but there are a lot of limitations that Kurt could probably go through.
well, I was in a town that successfully got a train house station on the register, and they rehabbed that, and they actually got an architect that to this day is in there. Beautiful architectural office in an old train house that they have certain things they have to follow. They couldn't just put an addition on, and there's very specific criteria. So I suppose in the end, if you do that, just the nature of that could limit, the type of use you want in a space like that. That'll be something you all can evaluate.
I think because this committee is charged in part with coming up with uses, potential uses, reuses, and looking at the rehab, whether we want to make those filings, I think would be a function of the results of this committee. I don't think, filing for those things should be an explicit decision after we have some idea of how we do want to use it, or what we can afford to rehabilitate, or how we want to use our resources. Otherwise, we could put our feet in some concrete if we got ahead of ourselves. So I think that a recommendation for filing for historic registry of historic places would be something that this committee would make a recommendation on, probably in a later stage once we kind of see where we're going with some of these properties.
Okay. All right, well, let's move on. We are looking at the agenda item number 4, selection of a committee chair. Sure, Dennis. Sure.
Just to give Kurt some specific feedback on his proposal of bringing in experts and things at the topic 8. Brilliant idea. I'm all for it. Any resource like that we can tap, I think we should take full advantage of. We should tap those resources. We need more expertise. We have a bunch of layman volunteers here.
I'm not, you guys,
Get that expertise in. let it evolve. As we listen to different people and listen to different experts, we may decide, hey, this is, we want to actually start a project with this organization or this individual, or maybe we don't. So, Kurt, I think I, for one, would be all for your proposal.
Okay.
Put that in.
All right, so going back to agenda item number 4, selection of a committee chair. I think the first meeting that we had, we didn't have anybody that was nominated as a committee chairperson. Are there any current nominations for committee chair? Yes, Fred, you're on mute. There you
Yeah,
are.
space bar is not working on me. Just to interrupt that, one thought, Dennis, at our first meeting, asked each of us to introduce ourselves, and that's in the minutes. Since Sarah's just starting tonight, suggest we do that first.
Sure, Sarah, if you want to take a quick second to introduce yourself to the rest of the team.
No pressure. Hi, I'm Sarah Dalbert. I live in obviously Lower Makefield. I've lived here since '01. 2 different houses, but I've lived here for over 20 years. And I grew up in Bucks County. So I'm excited to be on the committee. I'm trying to take it all in. So bear with me for my first meeting. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay.
So do we have a nomination for chairperson?
I'll nominate Dennis for chairperson.
I liked you, Beth.
I know. I like you too. I'm very impressed.
I
used to like you until you did that.
I think Fred's holding up the number 2 as a second. So we have a nomination and we have a second. So we'll take a vote on whether or not Dennis is the chairperson of this committee. All in favor?
Aye.
Right?
Well, Dennis,
Okay. Well,
the
thank
floor
you.
is yours.
Sorry, Dennis. You'll do great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
The floor is yours. I'm going to give you agenda item number 5, which is selection of the vice chair.
Do we have any nominations for vice chair, or do we have any volunteers for vice chair?
Dennis, I think it would be fair if you nominated someone.
I was going to say, Dennis, it's
Well,
well.
Well, then I'll chime in and nominate Fred Childs for vice president.
Oh, that wasn't fair. Is there a second for Fred as the vice chair?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Beat me to it, that I was going to nominate you.
Yeah, I knew it was coming.
All in favor of Fred as vice chair?
Defense, offense.
Aye.
Aye.
In that case, I would like to nominate Bet as secretary, because I think there might be the most work.
So long as you all don't think I have a conflict of interest, or the township put me on, so I guess I don't. So fine, I'll be secretary.
All
If you
in
approve.
favor of Bet acting as secretary for this committee?
Is there a second?
I think we're there.
Just for the record, Fred Childs second the motion for Beth to be the secretary, and it was a unanimous vote for Beth to be secretary.
Dennis.
Thank you, James.
Dennis, I just want to reiterate for Beth that, we do have a person who will do the minutes for the meeting, as you saw after the last meeting. So I would view, beyond your other duties, at least as far as the minutes go, that you could sort of facilitate that discussion or be the person that would review, be most focused on reviewing those minutes to make sure that you think that they're accurate, especially in that role, but you wouldn't be expected to be handling, feverishly taking notes and typing those minutes out, okay?
Okay, very good. Thank you.
On the Farmland Preservation Committee, I'm secretary, and so the minutes come to me, I review them, and then make any changes and send them on to the rest of the committee for their subsequent review. And it's very manageable. The township provides all the support if that method works here.
Unless you really want to do them, Bet. You know. Okay.
So Dennis, I don't know if you have the agenda in front of you. The next item is number 7, public comment.
Right. Is there, do we have any public comments from our meeting organizer?
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you. I think our next topic is to talk about our next meeting and look at our calendar. I know there's been a couple references tonight about some deadlines and timelines to make reports. And Supervisor McCartney was gracious in his stated flexibility at the last meeting, which was captured in the minutes, and so we're going to live up to that. With that being said, I do think there is a lot of work to do. I think it's very important that the tours be completed and that we have another meeting. So it's early August. August is a tough month always. Should we be targeting something in early September, about a month from now? Is that reasonable?
No, I'd like to suggest that we get the tours done within the next 2 weeks and try to get another meeting in sometime in August. Just to get a sense
Well, I
of.
definitely want the tours soon, but if we can pull off a meeting in August, I'm all for it.
You know,
Or
we can.
windows that are unavailable to any board members that we should all be aware of, you know, because you're traveling or whatever.
So can I make a suggestion to the chair quickly, if you wouldn't mind? I understand we've talked about this before, about having the possibility of multiple meetings a month, since we're sort of on a truncated time frame. But I want to start with September, and then we'll pick up Beth's point. You all, if you wanted to pick a September date now, bear with me, I have a schedule here that these fill up fairly quickly. If you want to pick a date in early September as an example, and tomorrow I can have my assistant send you out some dates in August if you wanted to, because the August schedule is already set, and we put out the limited days, but here's 2 or 3 days available in the last few days in August. But if we pick the September day today, you then at least know we're locked up on that day and we wouldn't have a conflict. So I don't know how you feel about that, Dennis, or that who mentioned.
Well, Kurt, do you have that schedule on your screen? Is that something you can share?
I can't. The September one, I can't share it. I'm sorry, I was just given a copy, but I can tell you. So for example, we have Thursday, September 2nd, wide open on any time of your choosing. Thursday, September 9th, any time of your choosing. What day is Labor Day? Do we know? Is that the 6th?
The 6th.
Okay. Tuesday and Wednesday are already taken, so we'd have the 2nd or the 9th in the first 10 days of the month. We have September 16th and 23rd, September 22nd. But if you wanted to shoot for something early in the month, the earliest would be September 2nd or 9th.
I am unavailable on September 2nd, but I am available on Thursday, September 9th.
I would like the 9th. I think that's a good idea. And really quickly too, do we anticipate needing 2 meetings in September? If we are trying to.
Potentially, if we can't get one in August, to Beth's point, if we can get one in early September, then maybe one towards the end. That would be useful.
If you wanted to do something like pick September 9th and September 30th, they're both Thursdays, and we could book those right now if you wanted to. And we could get you an August schedule at the end of the month that if a majority of the committee thinks that would be valuable to do that, we could do that as well. But you could lock up those 2 days tonight if you wanted to for September.
Kurt, is there a reason you're focused exclusively on Thursdays? Are we narrowed down to that?
Well, no, I'm not really narrowed down to that. Some other days, it tends to be with where the committee's scheduled, that just tends to be a day of much less activity. But we have Wednesday. So for example, at the end of the month, Dennis, we have Tuesday, September 28th, 29th, or 30th. That's Tuesday, Wednesday.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Because on at the end of the month, Tuesday and Wednesday, the 28th, 29 are fine. Thursday, the 30th, I have a conflict.
Same here.
Does
So-
the committee like the 28th or the 29th as well? Though you want to schedule, we have September 9th and then Tuesday Tuesday, September 28th or Wednesday the 29th. Can people do those meeting
I
days?
can only do the 28th.
I would propose the 28th. So the 9th and the 28th? That,
So I want to be sure everybody's good on the 9th. We can book that. And a time, there's a time, I know, some of you may have young children and other obligations. So what time works best on September 9th?
You can do earlier if you want to. If the committee wanted to move it back.
7:30 works well for me, but I can be flexible.
Are these all online or are they live?
For September, these would be virtual meetings. Yeah.
Okay. So then I don't think time is as sensitive if it's in terms of being late or early, because you don't have to leave the house.
7:30, all right? On the 9th?
Yes.
Okay, let's grab that time slot. And then I heard Tuesday, the 28th is available for everyone. Is that correct? Any exceptions? Same time, 7:30?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's put those in, and Kurt said getting an email chain going tomorrow, looking at some dates, evenings, weekends, whatever we need to do to tour the buildings. I think that's important. And
So I don't know if, so I'll have an email between James and Sarah regarding getting out to what you already saw. If you want to start something else about arranging a time to see those others, especially the golf course house, you all can start that as well. We obviously include James and Sarah in that as well to see if we can scoop them up for those dates.
why don't we try to do it all at the same time? I mean, if some of us who saw part of the properties, we can join the tour late.
At the end. Yeah.
Or leave it early or whatever. Let's try to do it all on the same day. And we can
Perfect.
for the golf course house.
Perfect.
the one thing I would say though is if we are trying to meet before September at the end of August, I have a pretty restrictive schedule in the next couple of weeks. So we might just have, we might not be able to do that, but I'll send all of my available times.
Thank you. Thank you, James. I think the most important thing is we get the tours done for sure, sooner rather than later. If we can meet before September 9th, God bless us, I hope we can, but if not, we'll do what we can. It's we all have other priorities as well, responsibilities. Okay. Is there any other business?
I'm sorry, so no meeting in August then? We're going to do the tours. We're not going to do any meeting.
We're going to do the tours. We booked the 2 September meetings, and then Kurt tomorrow is going to look and see if there are any August dates available by email.
Okay.
And we'll see
All
if
right.
we can squeeze in August, but we're not committed to it yet.
Okay.
Is that fair, Kurt? Okay. Any other things to discuss or topics?
And I will say for the committee as well, and for Sarah and James, if we have to do, I think everyone seeing these properties, if the next meeting is September 9th, is probably the best goal to have. And even if we have to do multiple dates to get everybody out seeing everything, we'll explore that as well in the next couple of days here, even if we have to do that a couple of times. Okay.
Kurt, did you say do you think you'd be able to get that property broker talking about reuse for September?
One of those 2 meetings I'm going to try. I want to have a discussion about grants and money and opportunities out there on the broker. And it's just a matter of who I can get and how quickly. So that would be the goals for September, or all of the things you saw on those lists. Or on the agenda, excuse me. Yeah.
Any other business or comments? I appreciate this committee has come together. James, thanks for your stewardship here to get us off the launch pad. There is a lot to be done, but I think we have all good intentions and good minds. Let's work hard, and the township showing great support. I'll tell you, Greg and Jim were terrific on the tour. Very informative, very helpful. Had some history and some background. It was very useful. So with the township behind us, the supervisors behind us, we'll come up with some good ideas.
Thanks, Dennis. Thanks, everybody.
I move we adjourn.
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
Second.
And for the minute taker, whoever, when Janelle watches this, that's at 8:56, Janelle. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Janelle.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Guys,
everyone.
have a great night.